I wanted to just start off by welcoming everyone and thanking everyone for their time and interest in joining us today. Let me just quickly go through my introduction and overview of CSA Group's journeys. For those that don't know, CSA Group, or the Canadian Standards Association, is a Canadian not-for-profit, non-government association that's been focused on keeping Canadians safe for over 100 years. We have two major areas. One is commercial, which includes testing, inspection, and certification. But today we're really here to talk to you on the Standards Development Organization side of things, which includes not only the development and publishing of national standards of Canada, but we also have major functions of research, education, and advocacy, which I'll speak to in a little bit of detail today as well. The overall goal of our entire standards development organization is to ensure that the standards that we are developing enhance the lives of Canadians and enhance health, safety, protection of the environment, and support and facilitate trade and economic efficiency. We do operate in 12 major areas of focus, and our job here at CSA Group as an accredited standards development organization is to ensure that the right people are involved, the right voices are heard, and the right processes is followed. It's important to continue to recognize and highlight the amazing contributions of our volunteer expert members. We rely on 10,000 volunteer experts that help contribute to the standards that we publish. We do publish over 3,000 standards and codes. And again, our role is really to make sure that there's technical rigor and an inclusive process when we develop these standards. Slightly more details on the Standards Development Organization. We do complete much more than just the development and publication of standards themselves that promote safety, health, environment, economic efficiency. We also have a major education program, which increases the knowledge of standards, and we teach the proper processes of applying the requirements of standards. And we do this in a number of ways, whether that's in-person training, but now in the COVID period, it's more so transitioning to virtual and online learning. But we have many different solutions and adult learning-based programs that help disseminate our standards content and increase users' knowledge of the standards that we publish. We also have a major research function here at CSA Group that explores possibilities in areas where standards can be useful or needed, and it has that proactive approach that provides evidence to inform us and our committees where standards can really make a big difference. And lastly, within the standards organization, we also have a major function of advocacy, which really is critically important to continue to drive home the importance and value that standards can bring to individuals, organizations, and communities. And today's webinar and showcasing the linkage between the use of standards and sustainable development goals is one such way which we're advancing advocacy for the use of standards. So let me dive then into CSA Group's SDG journey. I've slightly modified this and consolidated it as we do have the United Nations with us today, which I'm very excited to move into. But for a quick background on the Sustainable Development Goals themselves, for those that don't know, there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and these were developed in 2015 and are a 15-year global framework for a better, more prosperous planet, quite frankly. It's been signed on from 193 UN member states, including Canada and the United States. And important to consider as well that these 17 goals have more granular targets and indicators that support them. So when we look at mapping and utilizing standards in support of the Sustainable Development Goals, we do look at the 169 targets and the 239 indicators that make up those goals to make sure that any linkage between the use of a standard actually is hitting the targets and indicators within the SDGs. I will again just quickly pause here and allow everyone to take a quick glance at what the Sustainable Development Goals are themselves at a high level. You know, removing the eye test for everyone today, just so everyone can see what the goals are at a high level. I want to continue to highlight the role of standards and how standards can play an invaluable role in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Since standards provide consistent and predictable outcomes, they really are strongly linked and able to link with movement on the Sustainable Development Goals. It therefore removes greenwashing because you can link and make connections between the requirements of any given national standard and the targets and indicators of a Sustainable Development Goal. Ultimately, governments are responsible for achieving and adhering to the Sustainable Development Goals, but we're finding quite astonishingly that industry is really starting to report on the SDGs themselves, and they're already starting to highlight their use of standards in achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's important also to highlight the role of standards supporting the SDGs isn't self-evident. So we need to support those linkages, and again, that's the basis of these webinars from both earlier last week and today. To give you a high-level overview of CSA Group's path and journey within this work, we first and foremost started off about 2 years ago, where we mapped all of CSA Group homegrown standards, all of our national standards of Canada, and we looked at the linkages between the use of standards and the Sustainable Development Goals, and we realized that there was a strong linkage between our standards and the SDGs, which I'll speak to in a little bit more detail. And from this initial mapping and internal work that we did, we were really pleased to receive a grant from Employment and Social Development Canada, which allowed us to go in a lot more detail and granularity. It allowed us to partner and work with Ryerson, University of Guelph, and Niagara College, where we refined our mapping methodology. We did a validation process to make sure that it was credible and robust. We developed case studies or standard spotlights, which we'll go through in a lot more detail today. We also had recommendations and alignment between the standards and SDGs, which Kernahan will speak to again today. From that initial work and what we've done to date, we're now moving forward, sharing this communication story, again, advocating and showcasing the value of standards, especially as it relates to SDGs specifically. And moving forward longer term, our phase 2 of goals and objectives are really to start to develop guidance for staff, standards developers, to continue to encourage and enable our technical committees to understand, the strength that standards can bring to action on these types of goals specifically. Looking at our results from our first mapping, it is important to highlight that over 80% of the standards that we mapped supported at least one sustainable development goal. And importantly still, every single sector and area that CSA Group operates in, every area we operate in is supporting the top 4 SDGs that you can see in the top right, including affordable, clean energy, industrial innovation and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, and climate action. We're addressing these SDGs within every one of the sectors that we operate in. To give you more specifics on our second phase and our research grant from Employment and Social Development Canada, again, this really allowed us to go in a lot more detail, partner with academic organizations to ensure that the mapping and the linkages that we were making were credible, defensible, and robust. We did some validation. We also did, standard spotlights, which we will speak to in a little bit more detail today. Again, noting that our first webinar was really highlighting the process and the mapping methodology. And today we're really going to be focusing on the results and the linkages that we found. The research report will be publishing in the next few months as we're just completing its final review and revisions. So looking forward, the future of SDG activities at CSA Group, we really want to continue to elevate the societal good mission and priorities within our organization, and we want to continue to support aligning standards development processes with the methods and the SDGs themselves. So this will consist of 4 major areas. That being education first and foremost, which we're starting today. Communicating the linkages and values that standards can bring and how they are supporting tangible and specific actions on the SDGs. Excuse me, that's first and foremost. But then we need to continue to look at and improve our current processes and standards development activities. How can we potentially update internal procedures, tools to identify and maximize the linkages in alignment with our standards use and SDGs? Considering training for standards and standard staff and members. These are all things that we're now looking into about how we can better communicate the value that we found within this work. We also know we need to monitor and continue to evolve this process. With each new standard that we publish, mapping and linkages, they all need to be evaluated. So this will be a living program and work that we're looking to continue on. And then lastly, communication and advocacy to share the value and connections with this. And furthermore, we've also noted that the Sustainable Development Goals themselves are also very much aligned with very much environment, social, and governance reporting and priorities that, again, are getting a lot of attention and and reporting, which is valuable. So furthering the discussion and narrative between linking SDGs, we can also talk about the ESG, environment, social, and governance reporting, and continue to communicate those messages as well. So with that, I appreciate the ability to kind of giving that high level overview. I'm very much looking forward to the remaining presentations today to get into more details of the results that we found.